Shankar.
Sir, please go ahead.
Namaskar. Good morning, good evening as appropriate. It's our great pleasure today at IIT Kharagpur to host this e-Symposium on Gandhian thoughts and philosophy. This is the last one in our series of 5 e-Symposia that we have organized over the last 1 month to commemorate the year of the 150th birth anniversary of the Mahatma. And it is our great pleasure that today we are organizing it jointly with one of our very dear and valued partners, which is University of Alberta. Over the next 1.5 hours, we are going to listen to speakers from University of Alberta, from University of Toronto, and IIT Kharagpur. And we will go through the teachings, values, thoughts, philosophy, and learnings that we have from the life of Bapuji. And one of those values, of course, as we know, is to keep time, to be punctual, and to respect each other's time. So therefore, in spirit of that and without any further ado, I will request our director, Professor V.K. Tiwari, to please start the proceedings for today's symposium.
Thank you, Banandru. It's very nice. And first of all, I will welcome all our foreign guests in this e-Symposium. Florence Glanfield, welcome. I think I liked the way you said that last 6 months, in fact, all of us in the whole world, last 6 months, we are all talking of this online. And I can tell you this has become so nice that sitting in our own comfortable houses, we can talk to all of you in the world. And this has created the new normal that we are talking of with respect to saving in time, saving in journey, saving in cost, of course, in the end. And anytime now you can talk all these things anytime. It is night for us here, whole day we have worked, now in the night we can hear. And similarly, now we are seeing the prospect of getting professors from other universities in US who will be there in the night and we will be the daytime. So we will get the advantage of those people to our students. So it's very nice platform that I wish to welcome you. We have Riva Joshi ji from University of Toronto, Mijung Kim from Alberta, and Mr. Amit Kumar. I mean, they're all professors. I will call them all professors. Amit Kumar also from Alberta. And we have our Deputy Director, Professor Bhattacharya. Then, of course, Sanandrup is there, who in fact was a student in one of the halls when I was mess warden in that hall in 1996. So he remembered me immediately when I became director. He said, "Sir, remember." So I love him like my student. And of course, Professor Bhattacharya, another Bhattacharya, Baiduji Bhattacharya, our Dean of International Relations. So these people have worked so much and then brought these symposia. In fact, I must tell you, Florence and other foreign friends, that my faculty is so efficient that I can tell you within 10-15 days, they could connect the whole world. And the ministry wanted 1 or 2 universities and they have connected several, maybe 9 universities, if I'm correct, Anandru?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
9 universities in the world. And I was fortunate to hear from several people from the world talking about Bapuji. And then we have our very good Professor Subrata Chattopadhyay, Dean of Alumni Affairs, and another Professor, Professor
Pal,
who is Associate Dean of Alumni Affairs. And then, in fact, the main person who will coordinate the whole thing is our Professor Chanda Chakraborty. She's a very bright and dynamic lady. I have seen her for the last 20 years, and I find that there is no aging effect on her. And I think she is, she's very, brilliant and very dynamic. So we are very fortunate, Florence, I can tell you that we are very fortunate to have our such bright and young faculty who have created this. So in fact, with these, and now we know that Bapu is in our blood. In fact, I can tell you that when people were born, we thought we were told about Bapuji, and all that. And Bapuji's, I have been telling in every such comments, Bapuji's teen bandar. I don't know, three monkeys. If you have heard of that, those that we will not listen bad, tell bad, and then hear bad. So you have heard of all these three. And then after that, in fact, the life of Mahatma itself is so great that every bit, in fact, very difficult to describe in 50, 20 minutes that you will be talking on his philosophy, his ways of ahimsa, swavalamban, sarvodaya, harijan, and so many things that he did. It is very difficult to fathom into 20 minutes that you will do. But I think this is the time which is given to you so that you can focus on small things. He was very particular about time. I was just listening to one lady. She was talking in one of our such seminars, symposium, and she said that she was in fact in the ashram. His ashram there is a timing that everything must happen as per the time. So that is very important. And in fact, the importance of time is so very accurate even today, and that will remain forever. So that is what is the most key things which Mahatma told us. And well, I will not take much time, and I will conclude and say that welcome friends from there. With this, I inaugurate this symposium and hope to hear each one of you, your thoughts, and we will like to have some sort of discussion among you people also. And now shift to Professor Chanda Chakraborty for the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is now my pleasure and even my personal pleasure to introduce Professor Amit Kumar from the School of Mechanical Engineering at University of Alberta. Professor Amit Kumar is a very well-known, eminent authority in the field of energy, and he also heads the Engage India program at University of Alberta. And for me, most importantly, he is my friend for the last 23 years and my batchmate from here, and an alumnus of IIT Kharagpur. So who could be better than to coordinate this event from the side of University of Alberta? Amit, it was again a pleasure to connect with you and do this together. I will now pass on the stage to you to take us forward.
Thank you, Anandrup. Thank you very much, Professor Tiwari, too, for the welcoming address and the introduction. Once again, welcome to all of you to this symposium on Gandhian thoughts and philosophy. I bring greetings from the University of Alberta and our Provost, Associate Vice President, Dr. Chen at the University of Alberta. I serve as the President of Engage India, Association of Professors, a network of 60 researchers from 9 faculties at U Alberta, engaged in Indo-Canadian academic exchanges and linkages. So the association was created in April 2019 by a group of 5 researchers who recognized there was a large concentration of academics on the campus interested in engaging with partners in India who could benefit from a more coordinated approach. So our association's goal is to make U Alberta recognized in both Canada and India on the leading Canadian university for Indo-Canadian academic collaborations. To achieve this, one of our association's objectives is to bring Canadian and Indian faculty members to conduct workshops and symposia on topics of mutual interest. As such, Engage India was pleased to be able to provide assistance in organizing this event. I'd like to welcome anyone who are also joining us to please visit our website to look into different activities that we perform. It's engageindia.ca. This is also a special event, as Anandarup mentioned, for me personally, due to my close ties with IIT Kharagpur. I'm a proud IIT Kharagpur alumnus, having graduated in 1997. And in fact, with Anandrup, it's been a long few decades of relationship. Now, I don't want to take a lot of time, as I'm sure you're keen to listen to our esteemed speakers' talks. But before we begin, I'd like to provide a brief overview of University of Alberta's relations with both India in general and IIT Kharagpur specifically. The University of Alberta views its relationship with India as one of the key importance and a high priority in achieving innovative solutions to global challenges. For the past decades, our institution has been engaging in a wide range of joint research activities with Indian partners in the fields of engineering, science, business, medicine, public health, and humanities and beyond. Currently, we have 30 plus active engagements with 25 partners in India. We are one of the 3 founding Canadian members of India-Canada Centre for Innovative Multidisciplinary Partnership to accelerate community transformation and sustainability, which works to address key challenges affecting the quality of life of millions of people in India and Canadian communities. We also work with top institutions in India, including multiple IITs, IIMs, and ISC, as well as Indian government, industry, and community organizations. To list a few of our notable collaborations, in 2020, recently, U Alberta launched this joint doctoral degree program with 3 IITs, including IIT Kharagpur, the first and one of a kind of a Canadian university collaboration. Likewise, we also are the first and only Canadian university to have signed an agreement with Science and Engineering Research Board of India, Government of India agency, to annually sponsor visiting PhD students from India to pursue research at U Alberta. In fact, our Faculty of Agricultural Life and Environmental Sciences has recently collaborated with MS Swaminathan Research Foundation on a $5 million project focused on alleviating poverty in India. And to focus on specific KGP relations, our formal relationship with IIT Kharagpur began in 2013. However, our researchers at our institutions have been collaborating with each other long before then. For over 2 decades, our faculty members have involved in a wide range of collaborations, such as joint publications, organizing joint workshops, and hosting academics and guest lecturers, a large number of research interns, to name a few. As a result of these long standing engagement efforts, U Alberta is proud to claim the highest number of research publications with IIT Kharagpur among all Canadian universities. So in total, University of Alberta International is aware of nearly 100 researchers combined from U Alberta and IIT Kharagpur that have some known academic connections. So we look forward to growing these numbers and continue to grow as our relationship develops. And so thank you much for listening. Without further delay, now I'd like to introduce our moderator and speaker too. The moderator for today would be Dr. Florence Glanfield. Florence Glanfield is currently Vice Provost, Indigenous Programming and Research, and a Professor of Mathematics Education at the University of Alberta. She's also an affiliated faculty member with Center for Research for Teaching, Education, and Development at U Alberta. Dr. Glanfield earned her PhD in 2003 studying mathematics, teacher understanding. She is of Métis ancestry from northeastern Alberta. Her research interests explore the experiences that individual teachers and learners, as well as collectives of learners and communities have with mathematics and learning mathematics. Dr. Glanfield collaborates with colleagues and has engaged in research projects with Canadian Indigenous communities, urban Aboriginal youth, elementary and secondary mathematics teachers, and teachers, educators in Tanzania and Rwanda. So with that introduction, I'll pass it on to Dr. Glanfield. Thank you.
Good morning and good evening, respectively. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm just going to take a minute to share my screen with you, and then I'll be able to start my talk. Just so the audience knows, the format of today's symposium will be each speaker will speak for about 15 minutes, and I will introduce each speaker before they speak, and I will also be timing So we're going to try multitasking in this online format. Thank you. And thank you for your patience and understanding as we now move forward. So, colleagues, I'm honored to be speaking with you today and to share with you a bit about the way in which Gandhi's teachings and philosophy are woven throughout the fabric of teaching, research, and administration in my life as a teacher, a researcher, and administrator at the University of Alberta. I want to first of all acknowledge and be grateful to for this beautiful day that we're beginning to experience in Canada and that you've had the chance to experience and perhaps are experiencing wherever you're joining us throughout this gathering today. I am of Indigenous ancestry. I belong to the Métis Nation of Alberta, and we are one of the recognized Indigenous nations in this country we now call Canada. Over the last, I guess since 2008, I've had the opportunity to teach in a summer institute called Building Peaceful Communities. And it was a summer institute that was co-sponsored by two departments in the Faculty of Education and the Mahatma Gandhi Foundation for World Peace. It was coordinated by the Center for Research for Teacher Education and Development. And I had the privilege of teaching one course in that summer institute. The institute had 4 different courses that students could take, and it was a graduate level institute. The course that I taught was called Towards a Curriculum of Community. And I'm sharing this background with you because this is how I came to learn about Gandhiji's teachings. And so the course begins with teachers and administrators' experiential knowledge of community building in classrooms and schools. And we always started with the point of experience into the inquiry, and we looked at the different works of philosophers, sociologists, and curriculum theorists, alongside the work of peace educators and activists, to help us thinking about what it means to shape peaceful and inclusive communities. But not only to say what does it mean, is to say what does it mean for our work as curriculum makers in action. So we used a reflexive approach to reimagine our experiential knowing with new insights into our practices. So our course objectives were the following: to engage in inquiry of those readings, of those thinkers about inclusive community, to engage in inquiry alongside the writings and teachings of peace educators and activists, and to reimagine our experiences in light of those inquiries. So over the 10 years then, you can imagine I taught many, many students and I engaged in many conversations. And there was a core reading that we started early on in the Summer Institute where everybody would read this one article to begin our exploration of Gandhi's teachings and philosophies. And it was written by a colleague that you'll hear from later, Dr. Riva Joshi from the University of Toronto. And I share this quote with you because these pieces of the quote also really deeply connected with the teachings that I had as an Indigenous person and as the teachings that I have heard from my elders and knowledge keepers. So this core, and Joshi suggested in this article that the core to Gandhi's understanding of peace is ahimsa. And I share the piece about the common humanity and the connection between all living things. And I want to just start briefly there, because in the way that I see ahimsa, and I'm seeing this as love, is understanding that we are all related. And we have learned this even in our current past 6-month life, knowing about the human experience. But the other piece that is interesting for me in this is the connection between all living things. And so recognizing that we have there might be different experiences and understandings what living things are. And in our teachings that I have learned from my elders and knowledge keepers, that even the things that we think aren't living, like a rock, is actually a living being. There is spirit there. And this difference of understanding even how we define living could come to impact the way in which we think and work alongside one another. I love the phrase to understand, accept, and support the diversity around us. It helps me each day to walk into the meetings I have, into the tasks I have to do as a teacher, a researcher, and an administrator, to stop and remember that each individual in that space is I need to work at understanding, accepting, and supporting that diversity. And I love the last part where it says, this insistence on both one and many rejects the either or way, and in which we usually frame the world in favor of an approach that considers each and. So I wanted to just say these were this core that have stayed with me. And they've stayed with me because part of the teachings that I had growing up were also similar. So I want to just give you, I guess, share some experiences then in the way in which this love, ahimsa, unfolds for me in my teaching, research, and administrative work. And one of the things that I think deeply about in my teaching is where and how is it that the practices that I have truly demonstrate the love for the other? How is it that in my teaching practices, I am doing no harm to other, that I am practicing the notion of nonviolence? And one of the places that I have worked at over my years of teaching, and please know that before I went to school to do doctoral and graduate work, I taught high school mathematics. I have spent most of my life teaching people mathematics and then how to teach mathematics. So one of the pieces that I have really worked on in trying to understand is how is it that we assess and determine grades for our students. And I think we really have to challenge this notion of what is exceptional. What do we think is good and excellent work? And, when I teach the course on building a curriculum of community, just as an example, I have to give a grade at that end of that course. And at a graduate level course, the way that I negotiate the grading in that particular class is that everybody is excellent in my criteria, and I try to encourage them to move to imagining a different set of actions that they might take. So those students who can do that then might get a grade different than the students who are still inquiring primarily into their own daily practices. But when I go to teach mathematics, then I have to stop and think, what is it that I'm giving grades for? Do I give grades primarily focused on time, or is it honoring the diversity of thinking that is coming into my classroom and based on their experiences? The other piece that I think is quite profound about mathematics is, and from my understanding of love and the Gandhi's view of this ahimsa is to think deeply about our connections to all living things. And in mathematics, even from early years, we tend to want to generalize and strip away the human experience. And so now I'm starting to challenge myself to think deeply about how is it that I can take the concepts in mathematics and connect it again to human experience, to understand that we are connected to all living things. The example in my research is mostly, oops, I apologize, I just lost the microphone. In my research is really about the research teams and colleagues that I get to work with. And how is it that I am in the position again that I am able to listen to the diversity of voices that are around the table? And how is it that we come together? So even, if I have research participants, if I have graduate students I'm working with, undergraduate students I'm working with, really trying to pay attention to how is it that I interact in those spaces as we are engaging with research. The final piece, because mostly I'm in this new position, it's a one-year position. I'm the first person to hold the role of Vice Provost, Indigenous Programming and Research. And I've been really challenged to think deeply about what and the ways in which Gandhi's teachings can unfold in administrative work. And I want to share an example of what I've decided is a way of demonstrating that is when I first chair a new committee or chair a meeting, I actually start now with a set of principles that I share with the committee members. And the principles that I share with committee members are intended to share with them the ways in which I, as a chair of that committee, will operate. And where I look for those principles are to Gandhi's teachings. So I do talk about the importance of the diversity of voices, how it isn't an either or, it can be an and that we need to work collectively, and that in our interaction, come to understand each other's point of view, come to understand the experiences that we have lived, are living, and the potential for living in the work that we do, not only as individuals, but my belief, and when I see the teachings of Gandhi and the interaction of the 7 core teachings, I see that if we individually all contribute, then as a collective, we will come to be a different classroom in teaching, a different perhaps teacher or researcher, our collectives, each of our work. Sorry, I'm timing myself, and now I have to stop. Each of us can help to develop a world, societies, institutions that are more just, equitable, and inclusive. I want to thank you all for this time this morning. I'm very grateful to participate in the conversation that we're having in celebration of Gandhi's 150th birthday. I have been profoundly influenced by his teachings. I have had the opportunity to travel in Africa, where his teachings are still very much there in that continent. And I am so appreciative of you listening to my words and my experiences today. I want to acknowledge also that my colleague Riva and the article that I took that quote from. So I am now going to finish sharing my screen. And I'm going to introduce our next colleague, Dr. Mijung Kim. Dr. Kim is a professor in science education and co-director of the Center for Mathematics, Science, and Technology Education in the Faculty of Education. Dr. Kim's research interests include scientific literacy as inquiry-based teaching, collaborative reasoning and problem solving, and values in science education. Her current research focuses on teacher professional vision and visualization for scientific reasoning and communication. Mijung has published many papers and books, including dialogical argumentation and reasoning in elementary science classrooms and issues and challenges in science education research moving forward. Those books have been published by Brill and will be published by and Springer, respectively. I have the honor of working with Dr. Kim in the Faculty of Education and in the Center for Mathematics, Science, and Technology Education, and know that she too has been influenced by the teaching of Gandhi's work, or by Gandhi's teachings. And Dr. Kim, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Kim, please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself, Kim.
Mijung, we can't hear you.
Oh, yes. That's
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I heard the microphone would be centrally managed, so I didn't really pay attention to it. Sorry. Okay. All right, can you hear me now? Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Florence, for the kind introduction and also thoughtful reflection on the Gandhian philosophy in teaching and also in education. So maybe my presentation is a kind of practical implication of his philosophy, especially in science education. Today, I'd like to share the stories of my journey of walking with hope to bring our values, humanity, and social justice through science teaching in science education. I'd like to focus on my experiences of participating in a workshop organized by UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development, short form MGIEP, in India in year 2016, and my journey beyond. I'm sure you're very familiar with these diagrams. UN declared the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, as ambitious and intergovernmental commitments in year 2015, and they set the certain goals and targets to be achieved by 2030, which is very ambitious. And as you can see here, the target 4 is about quality education. And in this section, the Article 4.7 is to redefine education system for humanity, creativity, and responsibilities to this ever-changing world. So Mahatma Gandhi Institute, I'll just use the short form, Mahatma Gandhi Institute. With this goal, they launched a project called Embedding Project 2016. The Institute has been striving to develop peace, sustainable development, and also global citizenship through education for decades. However, for them, the outcomes of their goals and also efforts were not really satisfactory, of course, on their own standard. And they evaluated that's because these topics were not infused in school curricula tightly and directly. So the embedding project was to build capacities to develop textbooks of the future by embedding concepts of peace, sustainable development, and global citizenship in a core subject that was math, science, languages, and geography. And through this project, they aim to empower youth to understand local and global challenges with a respect for human dignity. And this diagram below is showing There's something that we as a team had in mind. So as you can see here, education for sustainable development was add-on or extracurricular. So teachers and schools had a choice to teach or not to teach, to include or to exclude. So it was not really a successful in school education. But when we embed these core ideas in these subject areas, especially in textbooks, textbooks as main resources for teaching science and other subject areas, teachers must address these issues with the youth to talk about or to think about these ideas in their own subject areas. So 33 educators and researchers and policymakers from 13 countries were invited to this project. And I was privileged to be invited as one of the science research team members there. Of course, before we met in Bangalore, in India in 2016, we had a lot of virtual meetings to develop the groundwork for several months before we physically gathered in the very place. So all the team members stayed in the same place for about a week to develop guidelines for textbook writers to embed SDGs, issues, values in science textbooks and also in their own subject areas. We discussed how to improve the content and pedagogy for SDGs and how to promote interdisciplinary approach and issue-centric learning. And also this is going to be embedded in school subject areas. So it should be very efficient and viable, feasible intervention in educational context. So there were 6 team members, experts in science education research team. We developed the principles, models, and strategies to embed education for sustainable development. And these 3 ideas, issue-centric, ST-SC relationship, and also social scientific issues were kind of a key ground level of the principle development. So issue-centric means students learn science contents and skills in the context of local and global issues such as climate change, eco-justice, food security, poverty, etc. SDSC relationship emphasize the complexity of science, technology, and society and the environment. And social scientific issues aim to trigger social injustice in students' understandings and how science and technology are engaged in these issues and how it can contribute to solving the problems that we are encountering in the present and future society. So based on these principles, we also suggested a couple of models and tools for textbook writers to embed these values and issues in science textbooks. And this diagram is one of the models that we developed to embed the issue-centric approach. So we suggested themes and problem context as at the center of the unit. And of course, these problem contexts and themes should address all these ideas, peace, social studies, sustainability, and or global citizenship. To make it more feasible in classroom approaches, we had to develop strong links to students' everyday experiences and also their science inquiry through big questions, and of course to develop the evidence-based science solving or problem-solving activities. The embedded data with scientific knowledge and information was critical. And the most critically, it had to link very closely, tightly to the science curriculum that the teachers and educators are embedded in. And this guidebook is available in the Mahatma Gandhi Institute website. So when you visit their website, you type the embedding project, then it will guide you to the site where you can download the textbook. Oh, and then also we also suggested a couple of examples of the units, sample units on nuclear energy, organic chemistry, and ecosystem and forest, etc. So the workshop was very intense and challenging. We worked till late at night, almost every day, and I was physically exhausted working with all these excellent people. But mentally and emotionally, I was very inspired by the critical questions and discussions we had. And there were a lot of people with so much hope and so much commitment toward these important issues. I was very hopeful, inspired, and motivated. So once I got back to Canada, I wanted to explore these ideas with the science textbook writers in Canada. And also at the workshop, there's one of my colleagues in mathematics education, David Wagner. He and I met at the airport, and we discussed like how inspired we was and how hopeful we were, and we wanted to apply for grant application. We developed a great grant application to explore those ideas. So today, I like to just focus on the science textbook writers' narratives only. So we came back and we wanted to explore how textbook writers in Canada perceived these issues and what hope, fear, and challenges they had during their textbook writing experiences for these issues. So we invited 4 science textbook writers, and 2 of them had over 35 years of text writing, starting from 1970s till 2000 before they retired. And the 2 of them were more recent writers. They only started writing books since 2000, and they wrote more current science textbooks. And all 4 authors had been or were science teachers in Canadian high schools when they participated in textbook writing. We were engaged in storytelling or narrative storytelling with them, and this is when my journey of hope started tumbling down a little bit, and I will explain why in a bit. So despite a lot of differences in their backgrounds and experiences of textbook writing, we could find a lot of similar themes from their stories. The first one was the tension within authorization processes. They told us the authorization process by government and stakeholders was very strict, and then there were a lot of resistance to embedding these ideas in science textbooks. They said they had to delete the part of values and social issues during the process, and then they felt almost impossible to embed these ideas in science textbooks. They said it was very political. The process was very political. Our textbook itself is very political as like curriculum, and it is getting more political in today's world, today's climate. And there was another layer of resistance and challenge that was the teachers' views in science. They shared even if these issues were included in textbooks, science teachers did not see them as part of science, which added another layer of challenge and resistance. They thought that was a social studies, not science. So I encountered more challenges, impossibilities, or resistance rather than hopes for possibilities. So I became a bit desperate and sad, painful, and also I was a bit disempowered in the middle of this journey, to be honest. But the stories continued, and I saw a lot of hopes also emerging from their stories. They shared that there are a lot of possible ways to bring out these issues and values in science classrooms. In today's world, teachers and students are engaged in much more digital information interactions, and then textbooks for the future will be also transformed with these diverse formats of interactions and digital resources. And they also saw a lot of hopes in classroom actions by teachers and students. They had seen the impact of SDSE teaching in science education here in Canada, and they believed in teacher actions to bring peace and sustainability through science teaching. So it was really interesting to see the both resistance and hope were seen in teachers' actions, which is very important message to me as teacher educator. So this is my last slide. So during the interviews and analysis of their stories, my mind was going through a lot of emotional roller coaster with the challenges, hopes, fears, even the despair. It was really painful at times. And I don't know how many times I asked myself, am I still being hopeful in this approach? And I knew this is going to be very challenging, but it was more than I thought. But my answer is yes, and I am, and I should be, because my journey will continue with the fellow science teachers and researchers who share the same concerns as me about the humanity, peace, and sustainability in science education. So that was my humble journey with the hope to bring all these Gandhian philosophies and values in science education specifically. Thank you so much for inviting me to this great event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kim. Now, I'm going to invite our next colleague to join us, and it's Dr. Chanda Chakraborty, and she's a professor of philosophy in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Kharagpur. Professor Chakraborty received her PhD from the University of Utah and holds a master's degrees from the University of Washington, as well as Jadavpur University in India. She is the recipient of many fellowships and research awards. She's traveled extensively for academic reasons, holding visiting positions abroad and delivering invited talks at many universities in India and around the world. Professor Chakraborty teaches logic and ethics at IIT Kharagpur. She pursues research in the different fields of philosophy, and her current research areas include public health ethics and bioethics. She has 3 books to her credit and has published many papers in reputed international journals. Currently, she's working on a textbook on ethics and serves as an expert in IIT Kharagpur's Institute Ethics Committee for Research Involving Human Subjects. We are so pleased to have you joining us today and looking forward to the teachings that you'll share with us, Chanda. Thank you, and I invite you to turn on your microphone and begin your presentation.
Thank you, Florence, for that kind introduction. I hope you can hear me and see the slides on the screen. Great. Thanks to the organizers for including me in this prestigious international e-Symposium between IIT Kharagpur and University of Alberta. My sincere greetings to the dignitaries from IIT Kharagpur, to my fellow speakers, and to all those who have joined today to listen to us. Mahatma Gandhi is one of those phenomenal personalities who truly believed in, to borrow his own words, in a gentle way you can shake the world. So not an earthquake, not a tsunami, but Gandhiji's way was an exceptional but gentle way to cause an upheaval so that the reverberations are felt even after 150 years. One such earth-shaking Gandhian philosophical thought is ahimsa. That will be the topic for today. Ahimsa is originally closer to the concept of no harm or abstinence from harm and injury. But it is widely and more commonly translated as non-violence. I, however, shall use the term ahimsa throughout my talk. If you look at the doctrine of ahimsa as a philosophical or a spiritual doctrine, then you may already know that ahimsa is not really a new concept. All the major religions and philosophical systems have endorsed this principle in one way or the other. But if you particularly look at Hinduism, Buddhism, or Jainism, then the Indian ancient texts have endorsed the principle in two ways, mainly. One, as a self-restraint or yama, and as a self-purification process or yoga. And together they are supposed to lead us to salvation. The epic Mahabharata has upheld ahimsa as a cardinal principle and as a supreme virtue, paramadharma. In this backdrop, Gandhiji has understood ahimsa in his own way. He has deliberated long on ahimsa and prolifically. In his view, violence is morally wrong because whatever good it appears to do is only temporary, but the evil that it does is permanent. Arun Gandhi, Gandhiji's grandson, writes that his grandfather told him that violence has two children. One is physical or active violence, and the other one is passive violence. Now, physical or active violence is what we are familiar with, the shootings, the assault, the murder, the killings that we see. But we need to pay closer attention to passive violence because it's easy to miss. Gandhiji brings our attention to that passive violence is violence in speech and in thought, and in all those small acts that we do consciously or unconsciously, and they hurt the others. The examples would be rudeness, verbal abuse, prejudice, discrimination, contempt, in our words, in our thoughts. Passive violence may not be direct or bodily, but Gandhiji reminds us that it's deadlier. It's deadlier enough to evoke strong resentment in the victim of passive violence, enough to someday erupt in physical violence. The relationship between passive violence to active violence can be explained through the analogy of gasoline to fire. The fuel for active violence is passive violence, long held, suppressed, and when it festers and smolders in the victim, someday it erupts as active violence. So in a way, Gandhiji is indicating that in order to control active violence, we first need to pay attention to passive violence, how to eradicate that. If violence has these two phases, then practice of ahimsa also has two sides. One is negative or passive ahimsa, which is conscious abstinence from all kinds of violence in our deeds, words, and thought. The positive ahimsa, however, is harder because it's an ethical imperative to love all, particularly the enemy or the opponent. It's the largest love. If I am a follower of Gandhian ahimsa, I must train myself to love even my enemy, particularly my enemy. Gandhiji writes, ahimsa and love are one and the same thing. As opposed to selective love, this is the injunction to adopt universal love. But at the core, ahimsa is a strength, an inner strength that Gandhiji has called the soul force, and its outer expression is the satyagraha or the resistance. But even this division between active and passive violence is not exactly new, because if you go back to your Indian scriptures, you will find there also the trifold classification of non-violence into physical, into vocal, and in the thoughts. So what is different in Gandhiji's ahimsa? I believe that there are many outstanding points here, but today I'm going to highlight only 5 aspects. First of all, Gandhiji was the very first one to weaponize ahimsa as a political tool in a very political struggle. And he successfully mobilized a huge nation such as India around that principle. This is what caught the attention of the likes of Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela in their political struggles. Second, Gandhiji's ahimsa is an ethic of resistance. It's an ethic of resistance. Ahimsa is supposed to be a personal, a private, self-redeeming exercise. You purify yourself. Gandhiji brought it down as a drill for the soldiers of a very public movement, the Satyagraha. Third, he truly believed that self-suffering and self-sacrifice are integral in ahimsa and Satyagraha. Gandhiji writes, nonviolence in its dynamic condition means conscious suffering. Conscious suffering as in giving up personal preferences, personal happiness, consciously. Gandhiji cited the example of Jesus Christ and his ungrudging suffering and his love even for his tormentors as the epitome of self-suffering and sacrifice required for a life in ahimsa and satyagraha. He also found the exemplary suffering of Ali, the son-in-law of Prophet Muhammad, as an inspiration. Fourth, Gandhian ahimsa is a creed, not an expediency. Gandhiji really wanted people to embrace ahimsa as a faith and not as a convenient tool. Faith does not offer certainty. Faith does not promise rewards. Yet it is embraced. Ahimsa has to be taken in that way. Fifth, Gandhiji's ahimsa stands out in its excusing conditions. Every overarching principle must have some exemptions, some excusing conditions. Similarly, Gandhian ahimsa also allows for certain excusing conditions that it permits. So Gandhiji writes, violence is permissible only when it is absolutely necessary, provided the doer keeps it to the minimum, and this is important, and the driver is going to be compassion. Not revenge, not retaliation, but compassion. Out of compassion, you do violence. Minimal violence, as minimum as possible. And this is where Gandhiji's thought stands out. Now we come to the closing section of my talk, repurposing Gandhiji's ahimsa. Repurposing means to use something for a purpose other than its original and intended purpose. In pharma industry, this has become an important idea, to find the usefulness of an existing medicine for some other new purpose, such as treating another kind of a disease or treating some other symptoms. Repurposing is not exactly finding relevance for Gandhian philosophical thoughts. We keep the value of ahimsa intact, but we try to use it for another purpose. So here is what I propose, that we give it a try, that we give Gandhian ahimsa a chance to work as a code of conduct, as an accepted, openly accepted code of conduct, a consciously chosen, ethically aware way to behave. What I have in mind is an organizational setup. Now, I come from an academic organization. So my gaze into this is from an academic organization as an academic. But I believe that this, what I'm proposing, can be extended to other kind of organizations as well. We need to pay closer attention to what he has talked about, the negative ahimsa. The positive ahimsa is a lofty ideal, of course, the universal love, but may not be always possible by everybody. The negative ahimsa, on the other hand, sets a goal to eliminate all kinds of violence from thoughts, deeds, and words. We also need to listen to Gandhiji's exposition on the elimination of passive violence. We need to remember that the passive violence is the root cause of all active violence. That's what he taught. And that might be the key to understand some of the relationships. Why a student goes astray, why a student is absent-minded. We may have some idea to understand the disturbed mind through the idea about the passive violence. Overall, what I'm suggesting is that we try to adopt this negative ahimsa and the elimination of passive violence to set some boundary in our interpersonal relationships in an organization, to create a space for mutual respect. And in that created space, let us talk about all those problems that we face or we may face in an organization regarding conflicts, regarding resentment, prejudice, discriminations based on race, caste, creed, gender. And we allow this principle, Gandhi's principle, to stay as a transformative principle, as an actionable philosophy. That stays. The modification comes, on the other hand, in its context. We need to take Gandhian ahimsa out of its acquired political context of civil disobedience and mass mobilization, because I am requesting to place it in the interpersonal setting. We also need to take Gandhian ahimsa out of its ascetic renunciative framework, because again, we are placing it in the everyday behavioral context, interpersonal behavior. In fact, I'm reminded of Martha Nussbaum and other philosophers who said that our goodness is fragile because we are ordinary beings. Our goodness is vulnerable to the pressures of external situations. This is an idea, and this is also an example how we can repurpose Gandhian philosophical thought. That's far I'll go here. Maybe we can take it up in the discussion session, but I'll end my talk right here. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Chanda, on behalf of all of us here today, thank you so much for that insightful sharing and teaching about ahimsa. I am now going to invite our fourth panelist, Dr. Riva Joshi. And Riva and I have known each other for many years. We were in doctoral programs around the same time. And I am so grateful for Riva and her family to introduce me to Mahatma Gandhi teaching. So Riva comes from a Gandhian family. Her mother, Karuna Joshi, was active in many works for peace in India and in Canada. And her father, Krishan Chandra Joshi, was a lifelong activist and community leader. Together with others, Karuna and Krishan Joshi founded the Mahatma Gandhi Canadian Foundation for World Peace in 1988. Riva has been active in that organization since the beginning and currently serves as co-chair of the board of directors of the organization. Riva has been active with other Gandhian organizations in Canada and India for the past 20 years. In her professional life, Riva has been a faculty member of the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto since 1999. There, she's focused her teaching and research on different aspects of education for peace and justice. Riva, thank you for joining us today. It's an honor to have you be part of our panel, and I will now invite you to share your screen, turn on your microphone, and I will silence myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence. I have no screen to share. You are only going to get to see me through this presentation. And I want to begin by thanking our colleagues, my colleagues from IIT Kharagpur and from University of Alberta for allowing me to be an interloper in this session. I am so honored to be here. I'm going to begin with a couple of acknowledgements. The first is a land acknowledgement, and actually there'll be two land acknowledgements. I am in Edmonton right now with my colleagues from the University of Alberta. And Edmonton is on Treaty 6 territory. It is the traditional gathering place of diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories and languages and cultures continue to influence this vibrant community. My university, the University of Toronto, is on the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. In making this acknowledgement, I thank the people who have been and continue to be the guardians of these lands, and for allowing me and my family to be present here, to welcome us here, and to allow us to thrive in this place. I also want to acknowledge that today is the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. made his very famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And I think both of these things, both the land acknowledgements and the fact of the anniversary of the March on Washington and the "I Have a Dream" speech, are important to what I have to say, because what I want to talk about is how even small ideas help us to build towards something bigger. The small idea that all of this started with, what I will talk to you about today, was the founding of the Mahatma Gandhi Canadian Foundation for World Peace. The idea actually had its genesis in 1986. 1986, for those of you who are old enough to remember, was the International Year of Peace. And my parents, along with others in the community, began to think of how could we here in Edmonton acknowledge this in a way that was important and would have some kind of a lasting impact. And they began work on the installation of a bust of Gandhiji, and to have a celebration on October 2nd. So for 2 years, 1986 and 1987, there was a garlanding ceremony at the bust. There was a banquet. There were talks given at the university. And then in 1988, the foundation officially came into being. And the birth of this foundation really was a project of many people who wanted to find a way to think about and talk about and bring Gandhiji's ideas into our lives in Canada and in Edmonton specifically. Many of the people who started this were educators, so not surprisingly, a big focus was to think about how can we work through education to bring these ideas of peace to the community, and Gandhiji's ideas of peace in particular, because As you've heard from Professor Chakraborty, there are some very specific and very particular ways in which Gandhiji thought about peace that I think have been very powerful in our ability to move this work into education. Where the foundation started with this work in education was with public lectures, with lectures at the university, and then in about 1990, working with high school students, first through an annual student conference that has happened almost every year since 1990. This year, unfortunately, we won't be able to do it because of COVID restraints, but we will pick it up again when we can. In there somewhere for about 3 years, we also did summer camps for high school students, and this too was in conjunction with the University of Alberta. In about 2003, we were really fortunate that Professor Jean Clendinen was part of the advisory board of the Gandhi Foundation, and she brought forward the idea to do the Summer Institute that Florence had mentioned already. This Summer Institute began in 2004, and between 2004 and 2019, there were 13 editions of the Summer Institute, and I was very fortunate to be part of every one of those. Part of the work that I did, and Florence has given you a bit of a sense of what the Summer Institute was, so I won't tell you too much about the Institute itself, but suffice to say that there were many different courses that we taught over those 13 iterations. I taught at least 3 different courses in that time, and one of them, which I taught from about 2012 to 2017, was a course called Toward a Gandhian Pedagogy. And in that class, what I was trying to do with students was to say, how do you take these ideas, these Gandhian principles, and make them your own? How do you bring them into your practice? And we would end with each of them doing a presentation about what they had learned so far. How could they take these ideas, or how were they imagining that they would take these ideas into their own classrooms? In 2012, right from the start of this course, some of the students said to me, well, now we need to keep talking. We can't finish with the class. We want to take these ideas to our classroom, but we need to continue to work together. So we began to work together. And since then, I have continued to work with several of the teachers who were part of those classes. And we now call ourselves the Slow Peace Group here in Edmonton. That title, the Slow Peace Group, came about because after a few years of working together, looking at what we were doing, writing papers and presenting these papers at conferences, a few of the teachers said to me, you need to theorize what we're doing. And I said, well, it's Gandhian, it's based in ahimsa. And they said, no, there's something different. There's something special. And because I was actually at the time reading some work by Rob Nixon on slow violence, I very glibly said, oh, it's slow peace. And they said, yes, we like that. What does that mean? And so then I had to spend some time thinking about what slow peace means. And what, in conjunction with the teachers that I've been working with, what we decided is that slow peace is actually based on 6 precepts. The first, of course, is an engagement with Gandhian principles. And I don't think for this group that I need to say much more about that. And I think Professor Chakraborty has given us a very good grounding in the chief principle that we've been working with, and that is ahimsa. The second is with this notion of slow violence. So slow violence, it has some similarity to what Professor Chakraborty identified as passive violence. Rob Nixon talks about this as a violence that happens over time and over space and largely goes unnoticed because it is so slow And because it happens to people and places that he says the rest of the world, I say elites, think of as expendable. And he talks mainly in terms of environmental issues. So if you think about the way in which environmental degradation happens, that to him is a classic notion of a classic example of slow violence. So we thought that what we needed to do was really engage with the slow violence that we saw in schools and in our classrooms and in the communities around us, but not just to engage with it, but to develop our own practices of ahimsa that would respond to those versions of slow violence that we saw. We wanted at the same time to say that this isn't just a response. This isn't just being reactive to slow violence or even what Nixon calls spectacular violence, the guns and the bombs and et cetera that we have become used to thinking of as violence. But what this is, what slow peace is it is a proactive approach. It is something that is based in these understandings of ahimsa that takes us forward. The third thing then, the third precept, is that we need to always step back to assess our own roles in this. What are we doing to perpetuate the slow violence that exists? In my case, for example, I've spent and continue to spend a lot of time thinking about my own role in colonialism in this land, and what do I need to do, and how can I undo the harm that I have been doing through that role. The fifth precept is that we found that many of us would focus on one big issue. This notion of peace, this notion of justice can be very large, and you've already heard today how many different aspects there are to it. But we found that if we had one big issue in mind, that it helped us to focus our work, and it also helped us to think about all of the other pieces. So one of the teachers that I work with, for example, is very concerned about community and how we build community. And she started by thinking about community within the classroom, in the school, with the people who live in the neighborhood around her school, with the people in the city. And more recently, she's been thinking about community in relation to other beings. So part of what she does with her students on a regular basis is they have a little, what they call a pocket forest on their school grounds. They go out there and they learn about the trees, and they learn about the animals and the other beings that live there. The final precept is that this is a long-term commitment. This will not happen overnight. It will not happen in our lifetimes. We know that, but we are committed to making it happen. So what have we done with all of this? I've already mentioned that we wrote papers that we presented at conferences. We've written some book chapters. We've created a website. More recently, we did a webinar as part of an international series that was organized by the Jai Jagat 2020 team. That's a global movement for peace that is ongoing. And we're now engaged in organizing a series of workshops for teachers that we're calling Educating for Justice Through Peace. We'll be launching in September, and we've been working with educators from 5 different countries on this. What's clear to me over these years is that there's a power in the ideas Gandhiji left with us. People are attracted to the message of peace and ahimsa, and educators in particular are able to see how these ideas can give us a different way to engage with our students. It doesn't conform to current practices in education that focus on individual achievement and preparing students for participation in the economy. And it's a difficult path to follow because of that. But there is a path here, and it provides a different way of thinking about how to create a peaceful world through education. Last week, I gave a talk as a part of an ongoing series to mark the 125th birth anniversary of Vinoba Bhave. In that talk, I noted that Vinoba Bhave wanted us to think about education as nourishment. It should nourish reason, the heart, and service to community. And to Baba's list, I added that education should also nourish creativity. And this is what we've been trying to do through our work in Slow Peace. I'm grateful to all those who have nourished Gandhian ideas in Canada because they've allowed us to get to this point with our work. And I thank you all for listening to me and allowing me to share these ideas with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Riva. So appreciate the teachings that you shared with us today and the inspiration. We have only about 4 minutes to have some final discussion, and I'm wondering if we might invite each of our panelists to just say a final word as we wrap up. As I listen to each of you, I'm inspired. I'm reminded of the teachings that I've had, that where we are today have been shaped by the actions and the teachings of ancestors. And our ancestors have been for 7 generations back. And we have a responsibility now as human beings, because our actions today and those steps we take, no matter how big, how small, are going to be shaping the next 7 generations. So I am grateful from the heart to each of you for the teachings. And I'll just invite each of you to perhaps say a final reflection on the symposium today. So Mijung, if I could ask you to go next. Thank you.
Oh, wow. I'm really overwhelmed by all these important ideas and teaching today. I've been feeling a bit lonely in science education to talk about peace and sustainable development because the values and issues are not really welcomed by a lot of science teachers and researchers. But today, engaging in this important discussion and event, I am very inspired, and I'll continue my journey with small and large steps, and together with you. So that would be my reflection, and I'm very honored to be here to get all your teaching and inspiration for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mijung. Chanda.
From my side, it fills me with pleasure to even think that you're thousands of kilometers away in a different continent, and there you have sown the seeds of Gandhiji's thoughts, and you're working with that. And I'm so happy to know about that. In your different ways you're trying out. As for Gandhian philosophical thoughts, I think there's a lot that we can do with them. It's our responsibility as educators to take the message to the people, the younger generations. That's my summation for this session. Thank you. It's wonderful to share the screen with all of you.
Thank you, Chanda. Riva.
I just want to say that it's, as all of you probably, I've been doing a lot of panels over the last little while, and a lot of panels that look like this. And it's amazing to me today to be on this panel with 3 powerful women who are doing fantastic work, and who I am just so... I feel I've learned so much from all 3 of you, Florence, over the years, but the other 2 of you just even today. So I thank you for your work, and I hope that we can continue to be in touch.
Thank you, Riva. I will now turn the proceedings over to our colleagues from the 2 host universities, Dr. Anandararup Bhattacharya and Dr. Amit Kumar. I apologize.
Amit, you can go first.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Professor Glanfield. On behalf of everyone with us today, and especially on behalf of our Vice Provost and Associate Vice President International, Dr. Chen, the University of Alberta, I would like to extend gratitude to all the speakers, and especially to Dr. Glanfield for moderating this session on Bapu's thoughts and philosophies. Thank you for your support. I would also like to thank you all for joining us, and to both of our international offices for arranging this. Without their support, it would not have been possible to do this. I look forward to organizing more of these joint initiatives with IIT Kharagpur in future. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Shriman Bhattacharya, Deputy Director of IIT Kharagpur, to conclude today's session.
Okay, thank you, Professor Amit Kumar. Well, I'm observing one interesting thing, because this is the 5th in the series of this e-Symposia, that out of these 5 programs, we had 3 alumni joined with us on 3 days. And today we have with us Professor Amit Kumar, who helped us to coordinate this particular program from University of Alberta side, along with his batchmate Professor Anandarup Bhattacharya at this side. That's very interesting. In fact, we had Mr. Partho Ghosh from USA and Mr. Partho Sarathy from University of Auckland, New Zealand. They were there on 2 other occasions. We are really thankful and grateful to all these 3. Well, I'm certainly very happy to see to have Professor Florence Glanfield with us today, along with the eminent panelists, Dr. Kim, Professor Chanda Chakraborty, Dr. Riva Joshi, to discuss about the thoughts and philosophies of Gandhiji. Well, with University of Alberta, we have IIT Kharagpur as a special connection. Not only on this occasion about the Gandhiji philosophy of Gandhiji, but on academic front as well. We have a number of programs with University of Alberta in terms of research collaborations, in terms of internship for our students, in terms of joint dual program, PhD program, and so on. I must thank Professor Glanfield to be with us today, spending her time and moderating this program. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us. I must thank all the panelists, Dr. Mijung Kim, Dr. Riva Joshi, and Professor Chanda Chakraborty for bringing out one or more aspects of Gandhiji's philosophy, on aspects related to education, teaching, research, and several other areas. One interesting point, what we observed, in fact, Gandhiji had put forward the 4 main goals before the countrymen these were the Swaraj, the non-violence of the Ahimsa, the Swadeshi, and the Sarvodaya. I think these 4 were beautifully explained and brought out so nicely through different aspects. We had discussion on healthcare, we had discussion on education, we had discussion on the economic aspects, and then today we have seen that role of science education for peace and sustainability, and so on. I mean, it gives us the whole gamut of aspects that how Gandhiji's philosophy can be applied in several areas. And that's possibly what was the aim. In fact, we keep discussing about the relevance of Gandhian thoughts and philosophies, how it influences us. And we really believe, along with our colleagues, we keep discussing with our director, Professor Tiwari, and our colleagues, that this certainly is valid even today on every aspect that we can take into account. I must thank my colleagues, Professor Subodh Chattopadhyay, the Dean of Alumni Affairs, Professor Surjo Pal, Associate Dean of Alumni Affairs, Professor Vaidurya Bhattacharya, Dean International, Professor Ananduru Bhattacharya, Associate Dean International, who were the main persons in organizing all these 5 symposia, along with the moderators, Professor Anjali Gera Roy and Professor Chanda Chakraborty, in fact, who were associated in other programs, moderate the events. I'm really thankful to all of them. And I must say that I'm sure that you all agree with me. The way the whole program, in fact, I have witnessed the previous 4 programs as well, and those who have witnessed those, you all will agree with me that how nicely the programs have been conducted, absolutely seamlessly, without having any technical glitches at all. And this credit goes to the entire technical team of ours, Mr. Shiv Shankar Das and his group, who have handled this program so nicely over these 5 days. I'm really thankful to them for their efficient approach. I must tell you that the programs that we started this symposium on 8th of August, followed by we had on 15th, then on 20th, and yesterday we had one, and today's was the last one. So these 5 programs we had. In fact, these programs, when our Ministry of Education informed us that why not you think of something, and Professor Tiwari, when he gave this challenge to our group, our faculty colleagues, they came forward, and as he said, that in a span of about 10 days' time, they all organized the whole programs with the support from persons like Professor Amit Kumar in this case and others in other cases. And we could organize this program. And truly speaking, that we have learned a lot from these discussions. One quote I am very fond of Gandhiji's, and I would like to tell you this, is that we all say that the happiness is in what you think, what you say, and what you do. So all are in harmony. And if that happens, that's the best happiness we have. And I think we should practice that to be happy in this world. With this, I conclude here, and I thank you once again. And I pass it on to Professor Ananduru Bhattacharya to take it forward.
Thank you, sir. Well, it's a great pleasure to conclude this, and I won't take much time. What I thought was, at the end of this 5-event symposia series, where we have gone through and listened to the different Gandhian values, ideologies, I just wanted to end it on a musical note with your kind apologies. My singing capabilities are limited, but I will sing just a couple of lines from one bhajan, which was Gandhiji's favorite. It is told that Gandhiji used to listen to this almost every day. This is a bhajan that was composed in the language Gujarati by a poet called Narasingh Mehta. And then I think that was several centuries back. Then it was set to tune probably in the early 1900s in a classical rag called Khambaj. And the lyrics of the song brings out what Gandhiji stood for: the values of empathy, truth, humility, ahimsa, compassion, welfare of all, or Sarvodaya. It was such a favorite, and the song has almost become associated with Gandhiji. And on 2019's 2nd October, which was the start of his 150th year, musicians from 124 countries performed on this song as a tribute to the Mahatma. So I will just end this with 2 lines of this song, and we are just going to disperse after this little musical piece. Thank you. मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जेने दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन मारे मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जेणे दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन मारे राम नाम सो ताली लागे राम नाम सो ताली लागे सकल तीरथ सेना तन मारे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराए जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे कोय पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान ना आने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे वैष्णव जन तो वैष्णव जन तो वैष्णव जन तो नमस्कार शिवरात्रि
Good night, good morning, and all that. Have a nice day.